Hi, good evening everybody. My name is Maryke. I'm the physiotherapist from sportsinjuryphysio.com, where you can get online physiotherapy treatment. So tonight's session is about neuromuscular stimulation, electrical stimulation. So it's basically if you stick electrodes on a muscle and you make it contract, I'm looking at, can you use that for training? Is it useful for rehab? And we're also going to see if it is useful for recovery, which is one of the things that people tend to promote it for, or try to sell it to you for. The points that we're going to look at is we're going to first check, how does it actually work? Why can it strengthen muscles? And does it actually strengthen muscles? Then we're going to look at if you use it in your exercise regime or part of your training. Say, for instance, you're a triathlete or a runner, or you just want to do strength training. Is it useful? Can you get some useful results from that? We're going to look at why you should maybe be careful with it sometimes, whether it holds any dangers for injury prevention or injury creation. Then we'll look at recovery. Does it work for that? How to use it, if it is useful. And we're going to look at how I use it for rehab and what I find it useful for. But there's so many different ways to use it. Then, if you're new to the live streams, make sure if you've got any questions, ask them in the comments. I'll get to them as they come along. And if you're watching this on replay, then feel free to ask them in the comments as well. And if you tag me, I'll know it's there and I'll go have a look and answer them. The other thing is I've got a bit of laryngitis, so I may go into a coughing fit, but I'm trying to keep my voice down compared to normal, but I'm not sure whether I'll be able to do that all the time. So do pardon me if I start to cough. Very well, so let's get going with how does electrical stimulation actually work. Now, there are a wide variety of machines and things that you can use for it. We tend to use complex machines in a clinic. Basically, I think, because Complex was the one that was heavily promoted to all the clinics in the UK a few years back. And to be honest, they do a really good machine. You get a variety of different units. So this is the slightly cheaper one, well, compared to the rehab one we use in clinic, because it has fewer functions. The rehab one we have in clinic, I think it can tell your future as well if you want. But if you're an athlete or you're looking for basic rehab functions, you do not need an expensive unit. And I will explain to you why not as we go along. What I can tell from the internet is that the price is pretty much defined according to the programs that's on them. So like, for instance, if I can quickly switch this one on to tell you what this one offers rehab specific things. So there's for disuse atrophy if your leg's not been used for a long time. There's a neuro rehab, slow start, things like that. But if you read up a little bit about the frequencies that's good for training different muscle fibers, then you can actually use any of the cheap units by just adjusting that. But yes, more about that in a minute. So basically you'll have a machine. Then if you've got a cheaper version like I have, you may have electrodes that you fasten via a cable. You'll always have a red and a black that you put on the motor points of the muscle. Now, if you've got a slightly more expensive model, you can get, although they're not that expensive anymore these days, you get the ones that connect via Bluetooth. So that's really useful because then you can stick them on the muscles and you can just move freely without the cables getting in the way. Also, if you're doing full body stimulation, you may have a suit that you put on so that it stimulates nearly all or as many muscles as possible in your trunk, your arms, as well as your legs. And that's usually the type of units that they use in the research that I've read about. But for rehab purposes, I often prefer this because you can really target the specific muscles that you're after. So, how does it actually work? Why can this really give you a six-pack by just sitting on the couch and sticking this on? Now, remember, our muscles contract in reaction to electrical currents from our nerves. And depending on how much the nerve is firing, it recruits different muscle fibers. Our bodies are all the time trying to preserve energy. That's that's their sole function, is to survive. And it's forever thinking that you will die if you use too much energy or too much, because it doesn't realize that we've got loads of McDonald's available the whole time. So it's trying to preserve it. So what that means is if I pick something up, my brain is very good at recruiting just enough muscle fibers to get the job done. Now, what the complex machine or the electrostimulation machine does is you can decide how many fibers you stimulate. So for instance, if I pick this up, I would only really recruit a few fibers. So I'm not going to get a massive amount of strength gains by lifting this up and down. If I want to get really strong muscles, as you know, I've got to lift heavy weights, because then my brain and my nervous system activates a lot of muscle fibers and we're getting the changes in the muscle that we need. With the complex, because you can set it to how high you want it to be, or you can set the intensity, you can recruit to a maximal contraction, but without lifting any weights. So that can be quite useful, especially for rehab purposes. If your joints, for instance, are injured and you can't lift heavy weights, but you still can work your muscles hard. Another thing on that, depending on the frequency that you use, you can either recruit more of your slow twitch muscle fibers, which is endurance muscle fibers, or the higher frequencies recruits more of your slow fast twitch fibers, which is more the strength based. So whenever you look at the programs that's been added before on the machine, you will notice sorry, that your endurance programs are more at the lower frequencies and your strength-based programs will be on the higher frequencies. But for all of them, they usually tell you to use it at the highest intensity that you can tolerate so that you recruit as many fibers as possible. Sorry, just need a little sip of water. Okay, so hi Dominique, I see you've joined us. So does it actually work for training? Can you get any benefits by adding this into your strength training regime? Now, yep, the research is quite clear on that this is one of the few electrotherapy things that you can use that actually gives you results with regards to what they promise for strength gains. There's a load of research studies out there, anything from explosive strength to maximum effort strength to even, to be honest, there's endurance gains with regards to VO2 max and things like that. But you'll also notice I gave up in the end today because the studies vary so much with regards to the results they get. And from what I can see, it's down to the fact that these programs were extremely different that they used. So when you use the complex machine for strength gains or for strength training, you're not meant to just sit on your bottom and get it to work. You're meant to do movements with it. So, for instance, sorry, if you've got it on your legs, you'll do gentle squats, or your arms, you'll just move them up and down. So often they use combined movements like squatting down and doing bicep curls, but not with any weight. Remember, you get the training effect by putting the intensity on this machine as high as you can tolerate. That's what gives you the results, because it recruits as many fibers as you would when you're lifting heavy weights with it. So yes, for hypertrophy, so muscle bulk, it can give you that. Strength gains, it can give you that. Explosive strength, it can give you that depending on how you apply it. And also endurance gains, it can definitely give you that. But not all of that is down to the muscle fibers changing. There's also research out there to show that the other thing this does is it stimulates and activates your nervous system on a spinal level as well as a cortical level in the brain, that it gets those neural pathways firing better. And remember, if your nerves fire better, your muscles can contract better and it's better coordinated and more fibers can be recruited more easily. So it works on the muscle level, but as well as the nerve level. Now, while we're on that subject, so you'll notice that I'm not going into detail about the movements you've got to do to get your gains and things. That would be very specific for what sport you do and what type of things you're looking to improve with it. So it's best to work with somebody who's got some experience in this, or just search the internet and see what type of programs there is available. What I will say is this little machine creates real muscle damage, as you would get when you do strong strength training in the gym. So don't think that you can suddenly add this at high intensity into your regular program and you'll be fine, because you may end up overtraining. There's also quite a few reports of people getting a condition called rhabdomyolysis, which is basically that you get so much muscle damage from one session that it creates so much waste product that it affects your kidneys, and you can possibly go into kidney failure and things like that. So to prevent, and there was an interesting study I read today where they looked at what happens if at your first training session that you use this, you've never used this before, your first session, you do exactly like the instructions tells you to do, and you whack it up as high as you can tolerate. What they found was that it creates so much muscle damage and DOMs and things afterwards that it can actually potentially be dangerous for you to give you rhabdomyolysis. What they then found was if they went on a more moderate intensity, rather, once a week a session for 10 weeks, and then tested it again, then it didn't have that same effect. So your body gets used to it, it gets trained, just like with other strength training. So be very careful. If you're new to this type of training, don't just jump into really hard sessions and really all-out sessions as you can. Be gentle with it, ease into it, get the muscles used to it. Just need a sip of water, sorry, otherwise I'm going to cough. Okay, so that takes care of the strength bit. Definitely works, but be careful how you introduce it. Also, think about it, if you're new to it, it can give you a lot of muscle soreness and things afterwards. So schedule it into your training regime that you've got enough time to recover after that. Okay. Now, with regards to recovery, and these guys are really being pushed with regards to recovery these days, the evidence is actually a bit dodgy. It doesn't seem to show that this gives you any more benefit than what passive or active recovery would give you. So let me talk you through this. When we look at recovery, we look at, now this counts as active recovery, by the way, if you use it on a setting where you get a gentle muscle contraction. So that counts as active recovery, not passive recovery. Now, in a review that I found where they looked at if you do this versus active and passive recovery, the following results were found. They looked at three things. They looked at blood lactate levels, how quickly you can get rid of your blood lactate back to normal levels. They looked at performance recovery, and they looked at pain and perceived fatigue, basically, afterwards. With regards to blood lactate, they found that it is possibly better than a passive recovery. So if you're just sitting down, this allows you to get rid of your blood lactate more quickly, but it's no better than active recovery. So if you're doing an active recovery, you don't need this on top. It already gets rid of your blood lactate at the maximum rate that you can. Then performance recovery, there was no better effect from using this than it had the same effect as passive rest as well as active rest recovery. And to be honest, in one study, this one actually created worse recovery rates. And I would say that you are at risk of actually not recovering that well if you use this on a too high setting for recovery, or you're not very fit. It's the same as with active recovery. It works really well for somebody who's quite fit, but if you're somebody who's just new to training, if you're going to do active recovery, because you're not that fit, it counts towards your training. So make sure you choose your recovery according to your fitness level as well. So this won't help you perform better more quickly than active or passive recovery. Then thirdly, with regards to pain and perceived rest, or how rested you feel, this gave better results than a passive recovery. So if you choose between just sitting still after you've exercised versus this, you will have less pain likely the next day if you've used this, but it's no better than a normal active recovery. So if you're doing a normal active recovery already, you don't need this on top of that. Okay. Good. Then the last bit is how I use the machine most often is for rehab purposes. I find it really, really useful for people who's had their limbs immobilized in casts or in boots and things for a very long period. I don't know if you've ever had that, but if you take, for instance, your ankle out of a cast or boot, it's amazing how dead your calf muscle is, and it just doesn't want to work. Or if you've had knee surgery, how the quads can sometimes just switch off. I've had a patient recently in the clinic who's had a third reconstruction and an ACL, and that quad just did not know how to work because they took part of the patella tendon as well for that. And this can really get, because it fires the nerve endings up, it can really get the muscle working much more quickly than if you just did try to get it working through regular exercise. Also, because you can protect the joint while you work the muscle, you're able to work the muscle at a much harder level, so you can get strength gains much more quickly than if you just use your traditional exercise regime for it. So it's a definite useful tool for rehab, but be careful how you use it. If that muscle has not been used for 6 weeks, you've got to go in quite gently. So we're lucky we've got a disuse atrophy setting on this machine, but if you don't have that, don't worry. What I usually tell people is go for your endurance training session. If you can set how long you rest between contractions, make the rest period double the contraction period. If not, that's okay. But just do 10 minutes of the programs. They usually run for about 30 minutes or so. Just go and do a third of the session the first time you do it. And treat it like normal exercise. See how you feel the next day. If you don't have much muscle soreness or things, it feels fine, you can do it again. And just don't put the intensity too high. You want to see a proper muscle contraction, but don't go full out the first few times. Ease into it. So see how you can adapt it. Think of it as normal strength training and use the same principles. So if it's an unused muscle, longer rest periods, not such a long training session, so cut the training sessions shorter, and maybe not on consecutive days even. So see how you can play with that. Very well. So that's basically my story for tonight. Remember, if you need any help with injuries, you're welcome to consult me via video call. The link to my website is in the description of this video. But to summarize this, Complex definitely works to help you gain muscle strength and explosive strength and endurance even in your muscles. And it can work just as well as regular exercise. That's the other interesting thing, that it didn't always show that you had an enhanced effect using this combined with normal strength training versus just doing strength training. Whereas for some other ones, it did. So it depends on the program you follow and how you do it. With regards to recovery, I wouldn't really waste my time with this. It may be useful if, like the football teams, for instance, you play a match and you don't really have time to recover. You've got to get on the bus and go to home. So if you're forced to do a passive recovery, then it would be useful to add this in. But if you're already doing active recovery, don't spend your money on it. If you're new to this, ease into it, because you can cause so much muscle damage that you cause yourself damage to your kidneys. So really take care that you're not too aggressive at the beginning. And as a rehab tool, and you've got a muscle that doesn't want to kick in, this is an amazing tool to get it working quite quickly. Let me know if you've got any questions. Take care.